Right now, somewhere in the Middle East, a narrow strip of water just 21 miles wide is quietly influencing the future of your money. It's affecting how much you pay at the gas pump, how expensive your groceries feel, and even how secure your job might be in the coming months. Because if this war continues to escalate, economists are warning it could trigger an economic shock, powerful enough to ripple across the entire world. And this time, the United States won't be able to stay insulated from the damage. It sounds distant at first, a conflict far away involving countries most Americans only hear about in headlines. But history has shown that when tensions rise in this region, the consequences rarely stay contained. What makes a situation different is not just the scale of the conflict, but how deeply connected today's global economy has become. Every major system, energy, trade, supply chains is intertwined, and when one part begins to crack, the pressure spreads faster than most people expect. In 2026, tensions between Iran, Israel, and the United States escalated into direct confrontation. What began as strategic pressure and proxy conflicts quickly turned into something more visible and far more dangerous. Missile strikes, military responses, and cyber disruptions began dominating the news cycle. But while the world focused on the visible signs of war, something quieter and potentially more devastating was unfolding in the background. Global markets began to react almost instantly. Investors grew uncertain, and uncertainty is something financial systems don't handle well. Stock markets became volatile, currencies fluctuated, and confidence started to erode. Yet beneath all of that movement, one critical system began to tighten in a way that could affect nearly every person watching this unfold: energy supply. At the center of this growing tension lies one of the most strategically important locations on Earth, the Strait of Hormuz. It's a place many people have never heard of, yet nearly a fifth of the world's oil passes through this narrow corridor every single day. That means a disruption here doesn't just affect one country, it affects the entire global economy. Almost instantly, as conflict intensifies, shipping companies begin to worry. Oil tankers, which normally move freely through these waters, now face increasing risks. Insurance costs skyrocket, and in some cases, insurers refuse to cover shipments altogether. Without insurance, ships don't move. And when ships don't move, oil doesn't reach the markets that depend on it. It's not a dramatic shutdown at first, it's slower than that. More subtle, but the effects build quickly. Oil prices begin to climb, and once they start rising, they rarely stop easily. At first, it's a small increase. Then it becomes noticeable. And then suddenly, it's everywhere. Gas prices creep up. Airlines begin adjusting fares. Transportation costs rise across industries. What many people then immediately realize is that oil isn't just about fuel. It's embedded in almost every part of modern life. From the trucks that deliver food to the factories that produce goods, oil plays a role in keeping everything moving. When its price increases, the cost of nearly everything follows. Groceries become more expensive, not just because of transportation, but because agriculture itself relies heavily on fuel. Manufacturing slows as input costs rise. Even online shopping, which feels disconnected from energy, becomes more expensive as shipping prices increase. As businesses face higher costs, they are left with difficult choices. They can absorb the losses, which hurts profits, or pass the costs onto consumers, which raises prices. Most choose the latter. This creates a chain reaction where everyday expenses begin to rise faster than incomes can keep up. For consumers, this feels like a slow squeeze, one that becomes harder to ignore with each passing week. But the real danger emerges when this pressure begins to affect behavior. As prices rise, people eventually start to spend less. They cut back on non-essential purchases, delay major decisions, and become more cautious overall. This shift in behavior might seem small at first, but when millions of people start doing it at the same time, the impact becomes significant. Businesses begin to notice declining demand. Sales slow down. Growth projections are revised, and when companies see uncertainty ahead, they respond by tightening their budgets. Hiring slows, expansion plans are paused. In more severe cases, layoffs begin. What started as a distant geopolitical conflict now begins to show up in employment numbers and economic data. This is where the situation becomes particularly concerning, because it creates a feedback loop that is difficult to break. Rising prices reduce spending. Reduced spending slows business activity, and slower business activity leads to job losses. Those job losses then reduce spending even further, amplifying the cycle. Economists have a term for this combination of rising price and slowing growth, and it's one of the most challenging economic conditions to manage. Stagflation. For many Americans, it's easy to assume that the United States might be shielded from the worst of these effects. After all, the country produces a significant amount of its own oil. But the reality is more complex. The U.S. operates within a global pricing system. meaning that even domestically produced oil is influenced by international markets. When global prices rise, domestic prices tend to follow. This means the impact is felt almost immediately. Gas stations adjust prices. Grocery stores pass along increased costs. Rent and utilities begin to climb as operational expenses rise. What once felt like a distant conflict suddenly becomes a part of everyday financial decisions. At the same time, the effects are not limited to the United States. Across Europe and Asia, economies begin to feel the strain. Growth slows as businesses face the same rising costs and declining demand. Governments are forced to respond, often by raising interest rates to control inflation. But higher interest rates make borrowing more expensive, which further slows economic activity. This creates a global environment where growth becomes harder to sustain. Investments decline, innovation slows, and confidence, the invisible force that keeps economies moving, begins to weaken. When confidence drops, recovery becomes much more difficult, even if the initial cause of the crisis is eventually resolved. What makes this situation particularly fragile is how interconnected everything has become. Supply chains stretch across continents, and disruptions in one region can quickly cascade into others. A delay in energy supply affects manufacturing, geopolitics, or economics. It's a reminder of how connected modern life has become. A single conflict in a specific region, affecting a critical resource, can influence the daily lives of millions of people across the globe. It highlights a level of fragility that often goes unnoticed until it's tested. And as this situation continues to develop, the most important question may not be what is happening right now, but what happens next. Because if the pressure continues to build, the effects will not remain distant or abstract. They will become personal, measurable, and increasingly difficult to ignore. So the next time you see headlines about rising tensions or disruptions in global trade, it's worth considering the broader picture, not just the immediate events, but the chain reaction they can set in motion. Because in today's world, the distance between a conflict zone and your daily life is much shorter than it appears. And if current trends continue, the real impact of this war may not be defined by what happens on the battlefield, but by what happens in economies, markets, and households around the world. In that sense, the consequences are already unfolding, quietly shaping the financial reality that millions of people will have to navigate in the months ahead.